Hi friends, it's Sarah from rufflesandrainboots.com, and today we're making one of my favorites, the Scandinavian Sweetie Holiday Gnome. Look at all these fun details. If you'd like to make him, just boop, stick around. As always, please give this video a like so I know you're here crafting with me, and it helps my channel in the algorithm a great deal. So this guy is a perfect tier tray guy. He's bigger than a normal tier tray gnome. He can stand on his own on a shelf sitter in a bookcase or anything like that, but he's still small enough to ship. We're going to need 4 mittens, 4 shoes, 2 sets of arms, a body, a base, and a hat. So do follow the pattern instructions, pinning everything right sides together. If you're new and are worried about skinnier seam allowances like we use on the shoes and the mittens, I'll talk about a way you can do this uncut. So once you have everything pinned, you're going to take it to your sewing machine and use a normal 1/4 inch seam allowance. For the mittens and shoes, those are a smaller seam allowance, but you can always just put 2 pieces of fabric together, pin them in place, draw on the pattern, and sew along that uncut so that it's a little easier for you to use. Be sure to follow the pattern instructions. There is no point in either the body or the hat. It's done for a reason. So after you sew everything together, take the body and the base piece. Those are not going to be sewn on yet because we're going to add our shoes. In order to add our shoes, you're going to put the seam in the middle of our body, and then you're going to pin that out of the way so you can work on one side. Next up, just turn your shoes right sides out, being sure to get those seams as flat as you can by running them in between your fingers, and then stuff each so that they are the same size. I didn't do every time to alter mine. And then you're going to take the end side, so the part that's sewn, and you're going to stick it into the body, pointing them a little bit together. And the reason we're doing that is so they sort of flop out a little bit when we turn everything right side out. So what we're going to do now is take it to the sewing machine and just top stitch right along that edge. You're only going to be sewing the feet. See this? We've started and reversed our stitches, so those are secure. Once you have that, now it's time for the base. You're going to first pin it along the seam, flop it to the opposite side, pin it there, and then you'll go all the way around. So I like to do north, south, east, and west. And I also like to turn out this edge here, lining everything up, so it kind of looks like a mushroom when you're pinning it. If you're new to sewing, do pin it a lot. Use 8 pins or so. If you're also new to sewing, don't worry. You need to just mark it where you've sewn on the shoes. If you do that, everything's going to line up perfectly. One tip I'm going to give you is when you start and reverse your stitches at the wherever you started your sewing, also start and reverse your stitches at the feet, because if any place is going to fail in your sewing, it'll be there. So I like to reinforce it. Cut off all your extra bits there, all your threads, and then turn it right side out using a dowel or something to, I don't know why I'm making it dance, to get the tips. When you turn out the arms, just be sure to get them fully and put the seam in the middle back. Next up are the little mittens. You don't need anything, just run that seam between your fingers, and then do the hat using a skewer or scissors or whatever to poke out the top. Next up, again, making sure that, making sure that this seam is in the middle, you're going to slip this all the way into the mitten, all the way down. We're going to stuff the entire thing, so you don't have to worry about stuffing the mitten all by itself. So you can see I'm just pushing it all the way down. And then grab your hot glue gun, or you can hand stitch this on. I chose hot glue, but you're gonna hot glue both sides on. Next up, we're going to measure out 1 cup. Don't go less than this. You're going to use this 1 cup of poly beads to add the weight, and use a funnel to get it all in there. Do tamp it down on your desk or table so that we can make sure that everything gets settled in that. Look, his little feet, and then, dancing again. So for a bendable, posable hat and body, I'm using the Dollar Tree floral wire. It's the thicker one, and I'm just going to roll over the edge so you can see like that, turn it perpendicular, and then make it in, or put it into the gnome, and then make it as tall as the top of the gnome plus another 1/2 inch or so that we can turn that down as well. If you don't turn it down, you run the risk of, or your customer runs the risk of poking that right through the top of the gnome. So you can see I'm just measuring it here. I'm going to use my wire cutters to cut it off just above the edge. Sorry, I'm out of frame. I have no idea why, but I will show you. So you just bend it down and then just roll it over a dowel, or you don't even need a dowel, and then I just stuck this right all the way into the tip of the body and straighten it out a little bit before stuffing the entire gnome. So in order to stuff the gnome, I'm going to be using polyfill, which I get from the craft store or on Amazon, but you can use the inside of pillows you get from Walmart or other big box stores. You can also use the fabric scraps that you made when you cut all these pieces. And I get asked a lot about how much stuffing to use. Always make sure that when you squeeze it, it bounces back to its original size, and that's when you know you're done. All right, so because we use the wire here, I'm going to sew mine up, but you can also hot glue. You're just going to make sure that you're catching the wire in one of the channels. So you can glue the wire inside one of the folds and then glue the two folds together, or you can sew it up like I did here. Always run it between your hands to distribute that polyfill. Drop it on the table and make sure that your gnome is stable before moving on. I'm going to be using a Sherpa fleece for the trim, so I cut 1 inch width on that, and then I'm going to be using a Mongolian fur in frosted gray because I'm obsessed with it. Let's just be real. If you need to learn how to cut faux fur, I have a video. I'll put that in the iCard above. In order to make the trim look round and not flat, you glue the backing together, which is why we cut it so wide at 1 inch. So then I'm just going to take it, starting at the back, I'm going to just add this trim all the way around where the mitten meets the arm. There you go. But again, you can do decorative sewing or use ribbon or whatever. So here I am playing with some gnome nose sizes. I opted to go a little big for this guy, and I'm going to pin everything. So when you're doing a sewing pattern for the very first time, get a lot of pins, have them around, pin everything in place so you can make sure you like where it is. I'm going to add the trim to the hat as well. I start in the front and just make sure the glued portion goes right along this bottom edge here and then all the way around. Once I have that done, I'm going to slip on my hat, and I'm actually going to pin it to make sure that I like where everything is before I start affixing everything to the body of the gnome. The first thing I start with is the focal point, and that's the beard, so I'm just going to glue down the top first, and then pay attention to where this point comes, making sure it comes right between the feet. Next up, I'm going to glue the arms to the body because it's a lot easier to adjust a hat than it is to adjust the arms once they're on the body. All right, I'm going to split the fur to its fabric backing. I'm going to add a generous portion of hot glue, and I'm going to press this nose into that glue, letting it sit before moving on. I'm going to brush the fur out of the way just so I don't get it caught, and then I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue. See, I got a little further, so I'm going to push it back, and I'm going to make sure the front of that stays in place. I then glued down the sides of the hat to the top of the arms to hide everything there, and then I pulled down the back of the hat to make sure we open up the front of the gnome. And look, I sewed on a little like Target dollar spot wreath, made sure he was good for my drop test, and he's done. I love this guy. He has actually been in my craft room all year long. I couldn't put him away from last year when I made him. But let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Also let me know, what should we name this cutie? Thank you so much for being here, and why not watch this Christmas gnome playlist?